Welcome to Paperweights, the podcast where two self-proclaimed gym rats and shooting enthusiasts delve into the world of literature with a sprinkle of humor. Although their biceps could crush a walnut, don't let that intimidate you. They also have a nerdy side. Mike and Brandon have a voracious appetite for reading, particularly in the fantasy genre, and they want to share their passion with you. So grab your protein shake and your favorite novel and join us for a humorous and insightful journey into the world of books with Paperweights.
Welcome back to another episode of the Paperweights. I'm your host, Brandon.
And Justin.
And this is a special Halloween spooky month
Spooky
episode. We will be discussing Richard Matheson's modern horror classic, I Am Legend.
Semi-modern.
Semi-modern, yeah. I mean, but Bram Stoker's Dracula was what, in the 1800s?
Yeah. This is
So-
54, so
Yeah.
70 years old.
Yeah. I mean, I still think that's like a modern age of literature. Because when I say classic or I hear classic, I think of something like, Charlotte Bronte and William Shakespeare and that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, or like oh my God, Huckleberry Finn, all that stuff.
yeah,
That
yeah,
guy.
all those from previous century. I mean, I guess this one's previous century from current times, but man, what's that? 70, 80 years?
54.
70 years.
Yeah, 70.
70 years, yeah. Jesus. Yeah, it was written
could've
quite a
waited.
while ago.
We could have waited 5 years and have it be on the 75th anniversary, but oh well.
Yeah. I mean, there's no time like now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, before we get in, man, I was at the LSU game last night and that was an awesome game to be at. I think it was the second game I've been to where they stormed the fields, and like I just remember watching it and getting home and looking at the stats. I was like, man, I felt like we got so many more penalties than we actually had. But I guess it was in the stadium. I was just seeing like things, and there weren't any calls, and they didn't replay a lot of the plays. There was one that was like, I forget which one it was, but I think it was like some catch that they reviewed and then said it wasn't a catch, but they never replayed it in the stadium, except for once. But yeah, man, it was awesome just feeling being there with my sister and then not leading the entire game and getting the walk-off touchdown in overtime. So
Yeah, it was a fun watch at home too. In general, I thought the refs were pretty fair. No super bad, overturns and stuff. It was a crazy game. I felt like each team was kind of drunk, just throwing balls up for grabs and stuff. But it was fun.
I don't think Nussmeier had his best game there. But the defense, our LSU defense came out of nowhere for this game. I was just like, okay.
Yeah. It was fun.
Yeah, and like I mentioned before, I just noticed that today on the dot makes 6 years since you and I went to see LSU play Georgia, and we beat them that year 36-16 in the regular season, and we made it out on the field that night.
Yeah, it was good times, good times. Unfortunately, the Saints they've fallen off a bit.
Yeah.
But hopefully get a good pick and we can retool for next year.
Yeah. I mean, as long as we have one of our two teams have a great weekend, a great game, then I'm cool with the weekend. So.
Yeah, same.
All right, shall we talk about well, first we got to mention we are sponsored by Mudcat Whiskers. You can visit their site, mudcatwhiskers.com. Use code Paperweights at checkout to save yourself 15% on your beard care products. And they have Woodwick soy candles as well. Right now, they do. I know he announced it, unless he's sold out. They still have two Halloween themed scents on the beard care products. Swamp of Sorrows, which has kind of like a bourbon scent to it, and then the Rougarou, and I do not remember the scent profile on the Rougarou. And if you're not from Louisiana, Rougarou is basically kind of a um, Cajun folklore monster. Um, Parents would threaten the kids to behave, or the Rougarou would come get them. Um, Kind of looks like a werewolf,
Yeah.
uh, but yeah. So head on over to Mudcat Whiskers and get yourself some beard care products. And now let's talk about vampires. So
Vampires.
yeah,
And kind of zombies.
kind of like zombies, right?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure this is before zombies have been codified or exist. And this is one of the this book is very influential. It's one of the first novels that uses science to describe uh, supernatural beings and stuff, which is kind of the big theme of this book, or one of them. And also like one one of the more dystopian first dystopian novels. You know, it was written in '54, so right after World War II and the bomb and Cold War and all that stuff. So you get all that fun kind of theming. But yeah,
Yeah, I
empires.
I was gonna say I could definitely it was funny. Somebody had mentioned this before, but as I was, and I can't remember who, and it wasn't about this book, but as I was reading it, I was like, man, there's so many tropes in here that I've seen done before. But then I remembered, oh wait, this book was written before any of these things that I'm liking it to existed. So it had to be the influence on these things. Like there's several episodes of The Walking Dead that came to mind in certain situations here. Um, there were certain things from Last of Us that I saw pop up in here.
Yeah, the spores.
Yeah, the spore thing. It didn't necessarily like it wasn't the same cordyceps type where it was mind control. But the explanation of the spores and how it just like once the water hit the spore, it shattered the cell, and that's why they just kind of dissoluted. Was pretty cool, horrifying to think about as well.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, I so overall, some of my thoughts here. Uh, I love how it explored like the human emotional and psychological effects like of a person in isolation from humanity. Um, and it's because it was a point of view of Robert, we weren't sure whether or not he was actually sane or insane in certain parts, or if he was actually seeing things or not. So it was kind of fun to be like, oh no, is that really this? Is that happening? Is that a woman off in the field? Um, and then I could see that influence on the book I already mentioned. Um, and then I like that the living vampires. So the end of the novel, the living vampires are actually the next evolution of humanity. And Roberts, you want to save the talk about the end till we actually get to the end of the podcast?
we can, I
Okay.
guess.
Okay.
I guess I'll give my brief because this is your first time reading it. This is
Yes.
probably my I don't know fifth or sixth time reading it. So I've read this book for a while because I got it. It was in somehow. Somehow this was in our scholastic book club at school. It, for the younger listeners, you used to get these book pamphlets at school, and you could like buy books, and you could get them. And like, so I was in like I guess sixth grade or something. I was in Sacred Heart. Uh, and yeah, it was just there. It had like it had a cover similar
At
to
a
like
Catholic
this
school,
Catholic
nonetheless.
school, yeah. So like it was like vampires and stuff. But I was like, I mean, I usually stopped getting stuff like that at Scholastic Book Club because I was a little bit outgrown for the majority of stuff that was in it. But I was like, sure, and I like put it down and got it and I read it, and it was crazy and awesome and freaky. I never read any of the short stories that are in most of the I Am Legend books that come with a bunch of short stories. But yeah, so like I don't know, yeah, pretty young age I read this depressing, fascinating dystopian novel of alcoholism and isolation. And yeah, it's one of my favorite like standalone novels I've ever read. Because usually I'm reading, epic fantasy and series and things like that. So it's very rare to get like that I read that's like standalone little novella at that. So it's definitely stuck with me all these years. And I haven't really, except for recently, gotten into more horror fiction, like I guess written fiction. Because I do love horror movies. I don't know how much you like them, but I love them. And then like
I love them. I don't watch them a whole lot because Christy doesn't really like them, and Jules is usually awake. But yeah, you and I used to go to movie theaters. We'd skip class at LSU and go watch movies.
it was a good time seeing the Descent in the theaters.
And what was the Sam Raimi one?
Oh, Dead Silence, Puppets.
No, not that. I mean, we did see that one. There
Yeah.
was what
Drag Me to
Cena?
Hell.
Yeah, Highway to Hell.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good one. Um, but yeah, recently I've been listening to a YouTube channel called Horror Babble, which I highly recommend anyone that's listening to check out. It's basically this dude, Ian Gordon, I think, but he basically reads kind of old horror, like mostly like weird tales, things like that, like a lot of like Lovecraft and like around that era of horror novels. And he's really good. He also puts like effects in it, and it's free all on YouTube, and it has a bunch of it. So if you ever just want like a horror short story or something, just check him out.
So he actually like reads, he
He reads
narrates
the
it.
yeah, he narrates the entire thing, and like
So it's get you mentioned Lovecraft, so that's public domain. So it's got to be a lot of public domain short
yeah,
stories.
yeah, I think a lot of the like the weird tales like that published Lovecraft. A lot of that stuff is public domain. But yeah, and it's really fun. Like
Awesome.
Algernon Black, like the Wendigo story. I don't know if you ever heard that, but
Yes.
like that's on there. But he's got a lot of good stuff. But it's fun getting back into horror fiction.
Yeah, and so like Christy and there's the show that came out last year, Fall of the House of Usher, and it's like a modernized version of Poe's story. I don't know if it's a novel or if it was a short story, but we we tried to start watching it last year when it came out, and I was just like, I don't know what the hell's going on. I'm not catching on, and so we stopped like 20 minutes into the first episode. Uh, but this year we picked it back up and been watching it, and there's some absolutely disturbing scenes in it. Um, it's really good, and it's by the same guy. I can't remember his name, but there was another show called Midnight Mass, which if you have not watched Midnight Mass, that is another really good horror like miniseries.
Yeah, I need to check that out.
Like I would watch that over Fall of the House of Usher. I haven't finished Fall of the House of Usher. The same guy also did, I think, House on Haunted Hill or something. Um, he's really good, and I can't remember. Let's see here. Midnight Mass director Mike Flanagan is the guy's name. Um, yeah, he's really good. He how The Haunting of Hill House. Sorry, The
Mm.
Haunting of Hill House, Haunting of Bly Manor, Midnight Mass, Midnight Club, Fall of the House of Usher, um, Doctor Sleep. So the sequel to The Shining.
I haven't seen that one.
I haven't watched that one either. I think Jason has, and like Jason's big on horror as well. Um, and that's cool. Mike Flanagan's actually was born in Salem, Massachusetts,
There
so
you go.
maybe that's why he's really big on horror. Um, but yeah, sorry, we're getting way off topic
Yeah.
of the book, but it's spooky month. We could
Yeah.
talk about it. I don't think it's going to take long to discuss the book, but Midnight Mass takes place like on this island, and there's like a population of Catholics, and there's a priest, and so then there's like strange things that are happening. Um, I remember the twists. I don't remember the setup at the beginning, so I can't talk too much without giving away anything. But it is absolutely amazing and thought provoking as well. So
Yeah. And I
for
know there's a
you and listeners, definitely go watch Midnight Mass.
I'll have to check it out. I know there's a new Salem's Lot show or movie on HBO Max, so I might check that out too.
Well, I might have to check that.
I'm not the biggest Stephen King fan, but he's pretty good. Like, tried for a while to read it. It's so long. It's like 1,000 pages. It's ridiculous. I need to get back to it, but
Yeah, I
and
haven't tried to read that.
I read a bunch of the Dark Tower. I never finished Dark Tower. Dark Tower
Uh,
is good. It's not really horror, but
I read the first three. So like was it
it's the
the
gunslinger.
Gunslinger, the drawing of the three,
Yeah,
and then the Wastelands?
yeah,
Because the third one is the one with the train, right?
I think so.
Yeah. So I read all three of those. It's funny as I stayed home, I was sick from work years ago, and it was on a Monday, and I spent that entire, or not that entire day, but I read The Gunslinger that day in its entirety.
Gunslinger's short, but yeah.
And then a few weeks later, I was home from work sick again, and I read Drawing of the Three in its entirety in that day. And then the third book, it took me more than one day to read, but I really liked those, but I didn't continue on.
Yeah,
But
they're weird.
yeah, I like horror. You've introduced me to a lot of what have become some of my favorite horror films, like the Thing. Which is funny is I every now and then I get my wife to watch horror movies like Friday the 13th or during October. She doesn't really like a whole lot of horror movies. There's certain types that she does like, but I remember the first we tried one night to watch The Thing, and she was just like not into it. And then like a year or two later, we watched it again, and she was like, "Okay, that was really good." And sometimes that happens, like you're not in the mood for something. So
Yeah, or just hit you wrong. Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I just last thing on what we've been watching horror related. I recently, like this month, or a little earlier, for spooky season, I watched all the Scream movies.
Scream movies?
Yeah, there's six of them, which is crazy. Most of them are on Max. They're actually pretty good. I enjoy them. The first one's obviously the best. It's a classic, but the rest are fun. They're not really scary, but they're fun.
Yeah, I think I've only seen the first two or three. Um, and it's been a while since I've seen either of them, yeah, or any of them rather. I was watching before the Saints game, Friday the 13th part two. It was just on TV, and I put it on before the Saints game today. And I was like, man, I really like 80s horror movies.
They're fun.
Yeah. So
We don't quite do it the way we used to. Just sad.
Right. All right. So let's discuss the book. Awesome cover right there. I like that version of the cover more than the one that just has the eyes, that shows the eyes and one's glassed over and one's not. Um, so, and I found out, so I posted on Facebook just announcing to any of my friends that we're into horror. I was like, hey, this week we'll be reading this book and discussing it on the podcast. And I got way more people than I expected, like responding to me, like, oh man, that's a good book, or oh, that one's on my list. And I was like, yeah, man, you could read it in like 3 hours. And somebody was like, who, or rather, not who, or y'all have time in a day to read a whole book? I was like, eh, depends on what you dedicate your free time to. So
Yeah,
I hate people who judge how you spend your free time or your money when it's like your like non-detrimental things. Um, like a lot of times people will go, "Hey man, why do you want to spend your money and go to Disney World?" It's like, because I fucking like Disney World. Like
yeah,
I like it. Like don't shame me for liking Disney World. And if I want to spend my money and you think it's worth or so you think it's too expensive, but it's my money I'm spending on it, why the hell do you care?
yeah. And also, for making time to read, I've always read at night before I go to bed. So, like, let's say I want to go to sleep like 11, I'll read till like 11 or 11:30 and be a little tired the next day or whatever, but I get, the book done. So that's kind of how I've done it. I don't usually read like in the mornings or anything like that. I'm usually a nighttime reader.
I'm usually either an early morning reader or a nighttime reader. But whenever I am tired, I just like to go to sleep.
Makes sense.
I can literally be sitting there reading something I'm really interested in or watching something I'm really interested in, and if I am tired, I start to go just doze off, and then I'm like, okay, I just got to end it right here. Sometimes it sucks because I picked the book up in the morning and I'm like, I was literally right there at the action, and I just could not read anymore. So
Yeah, I was one of those kids that would stay up to like 4:30 in the morning reading books. Hmm.
just like the guest that he had I had on here, Mo, she said she'd be staying up reading books, and her dad would get home and it'd be like midnight, and he'd be like, "It's time to go to bed." She's like, "I can't. I gotta know what happens to these characters." Like,
Yeah.
um, so that was a cool episode. So if y'all haven't listened to that episode with Cosmere Mo, go back and check it out. She's got some interesting stuff. So, all right, chapter one.
A little bit of intro.
Robert Neville is our main character. He is 36 and he's got blue eyes. He is human. He hasn't been um, altered or anything yet. He's not affected by the virus or bacteria, which we come to find out. Um, the year is January 1976. It is 5 months since a supposed uh, event that we don't know about what the event is in the book yet. We do find out later that it was like a plague that came out and wiped out basically all of humanity. And this was after a war, after a nuclear war that kind of caused all these dust storms and everything. Um, so we're at Robert's house. Um, he's just checking his defenses in this house, making needed repairs and everything. There's creatures that come at night and throw things at his house. So he has to go repair the things. Um, he hangs garlic outside the house, and then he needs to go, or rather, he prepares the strings of garlic, and he needs to lay down some more wood to create his wood stakes. We meet Ben Cortman, who likes to appear outside of his house around 6:25 every day, and this will forever live in my head now. Is Come out, Neville. It's just like,
Yeah.
um, s-
Imagine getting screamed at like every day for like months.
for years.
Yeah, years.
I mean, it's been years by the end of the book. Come out, Neville. Very, very haunting. Women show up. There are these zombies, and they lift up their dresses and take off their shirts to try to kind of entice Robert to come outside so they can drink his blood, um, which we didn't find out till later, about what the vampires are, what these creatures are, rather.
Yeah,
Um,
you do learn early on that he calls them vampires. Yeah, like
right, like
he's
chapter 3 or something, but
yeah, he's hanging mirrors, even though the mirrors don't seem to work. He's heard all the legends, and I am legend.
yeah, I do like that he it references like Bram Stoker's Dracula. It references all the mythology of vampires throughout the book.
Yeah, I do like that as well because it's kind of weird in some zombie movies. It's like Zombieland doesn't do this, but like some of them were like, "What is this new thing we've never heard of?" And like trying to do, they do it like that, where it's like a brand new concept that's happening. Where where this is like, no, we know vampires, we know the legends and all this stuff, and maybe they've been this virus has been around for a while, maybe not. It's just spread because of the dust storms and or mutated, like we find out at the end. Bacteria mutates.
By what?
Bacteria mutates.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so that's pretty much that chapter. We could just roll right into chapters and just discuss things. So if there's something that comes up, just bring it up.
Yeah, yeah. I would just say in general for this, it's a very unique novel. As it's basically you only have a single character until the end where you get Ruth for a little bit, but even her is not that much. But it reminds me of like I don't know, something like Hatchet's. I think the only other book I've ever really read where you just have a single character.
I mean, I bought Hatchet to read, and I haven't read it yet. I've never read Hatchet.
Oh,
I
you
didn't
never
have
read
to,
Hatchet?
I didn't have to read it in school, but
Mm. Hatchet's good. I don't know if it holds up, but you know the basic plot.
yeah, I have it. So
Yeah, we had to read it in school. I even read the sequel. The sequel is not that great. Um, but yeah, just like I don't know, it's you really. This is a really well written book where you really feel the isolation and how it like plays on you, which is a lot of the what happens in the chapters of him just like drinking and like just like going kind of insane because he's just alone, and that's how it weighs on him.
yeah, it really does remind me of Andy Weir's novels, The Martian, where the astronaut gets stuck on Mars and then he's isolated by himself. He does all the scientific stuff to survive. And then another Andy Weir book, Project Hail Mary, which I discussed with Mike on the podcast. We read that one together. And that's, sends a man out into space to try to save humanity. Um, and he's by himself. So I like that exploration of isolation in novels and movies because it really does like I like psychological stuff. Um, so yeah.
Yeah,
All right, so that will be bringing us to chapter 2. Um, so Robert's it's the morning the next morning he tosses there's like two women's bodies and he does this kind of ritual thing. There's bodies, any bodies that stay out in the front yard out in the morning. He tosses them in the back of his car and brings them to this burn pit in the middle of the city. And I think this is in LA or like in the LA
yeah,
area
yeah. Because he
because
lives
like
in Compton.
Compton. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh so he eats breakfast and heads out to Sears to buy supply or not buy pilfer supplies from the store, fills up uh fills the car up with gasoline. Um he starts remembering Kathy. At this point, we don't know who Kathy is, but we find out it is his daughter. Did we ever find out how old she was?
I don't know if it's sad. Figured she was pretty young, like less than 10.
Because I know in the flashback where that man takes her body from him to throw in the burn pit, he he his mental thoughts are they took my baby. So I don't know if it was like a baby or a kid or
Yeah,
how.
you get a glimpse of her room and stuff. I think my in my head at least, I don't know if there was she was probably like 6. It's kind of what I thought.
Okay,
But she's like old enough to go to school because they say that, but like so I didn't seem so maybe 6 or 7, something like that, like first grade or something.
gotcha. Yeah,
But,
it's
but yeah, I like how that is conveyed because just like and then like he went into Kathy's room. And he's like, no, it's the larder or whatever. And it's just like you get that little snippet of like, oh, the past and all that stuff. It's really good.
yeah, and he revisits that a lot. He's like, I can't go back to the past because it just drives me insane, or drives him insane. I mean, yeah, you get it. He does take it upon himself to seek out any of these living vampires who go into a coma during the daytime, and if he finds them, he stakes them. Um, he gets supplies to kill more. So that day he killed 47 plus the 5 at Sears, so like 52 roughly. That's a lot of killing.
Yeah, it's a lot of stakes.
It is a lot of stakes. But did the stakes have to stay in there? I mean, why can't he just have one stake and
I mean, I think in the lore you would want to you have to keep the stake in, right? Until they like blow up.
I don't I mean, I don't know. I don't know how the lore works there.
Well, we know later it just needed to let the air in, so that's what the stake is doing. But I don't think he ever stuck around long enough to do it. He just was like, "All right, this you just have to stake them in the heart, and they die. So I'm just gonna leave it in there."
Okay.
Man,
It seemed kind of silly, just but yeah. Um this is the first mention that they are vampires, this chapter. So we get that early and out of the way. Cool. We're not pretending that there's something else that's like a vampire, like you mentioned before. Um, yeah. Um, so the fire pit, it's like a perpetually burning pit, which I don't understand how that necessarily works.
I don't know, just something cool.
Because it's been around for 6 months at this point, right? It started in June in 1975, and now it's January of the next year. So,
Yeah, it's something that the government set up so you could go burn your dead, which is super messed up and shows you get all these little fun sneak peeks of like the end of the world. Um, but yeah, I don't know how scientifically it works, but it's just a really cool image of just like this perpetually burning pyre where you just throw your dead on it. It's pretty messed up.
and he covers he has to cover his face when he gets near it from the fumes or whatever, huh?
Yeah, fumes or the smell or all the burning flesh.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Um, what was I gonna? I don't remember what I was gonna say. But on to chapter 3. Uh, so we're back at Robert's house, and he's struggling today. He's on the struggle bus right now with his madness from being so lonely. He's drinking. He shatters the glass, just squeezing it, um, and cuts his hand. And I don't know, like I've never done it with like an actual like tumbler glass. I mean, a wine glass would be easy to do this with. Um, so he must just have thin glasses. And then he decides to write a essay basically on why vampires aren't evil and that they're no different than any other beast or creature on the planet. And they are just things like trying to survive, and he's trying to I think he's trying to rationalize why he's like killing them.
Hmm.
Um and yeah, this is a chapter where he's reading Stoker's Dracula, and he says that all of that, like everything in there is like superstition. Like these things don't need to be there. Um and just ultimately this chapter, I think this is the first chapter we get a glimpse of Robert's insanity. And I love how it's written.
Yeah, definitely. Um, because it's also understandable, and you don't really get too much of it. It's also what well, we can talk about the adaptations at the end, but a lot of the adaptations kind of lose this. Because like the Will Smith one, he has the dog from the beginning, so he's not alone. Um, and it also completely screws up the ending and the point of the novel. But yeah, it's like yeah, just him going crazy and like also you know his like base needs are like brought up, so like stuff like companionship and seeing the women, he's like I can't do it because it might he's horny, so like you get a lot of like and he's just going insane. It's really fun.
Yeah. I was gonna oh I what I was gonna mention was the fire pit. It was mandated by law to burn your dead. So it's
Yeah,
kind of messed up there.
yeah, because curious how long before everything totally broke down, that because there's still at least some government until everybody else was one of the living vampires and just everything fell apart.
Yeah. So next chapter, he wakes up at 10 a.m. And his alarm didn't go off. He's hungover. He's going stir crazy, so he just gets into his car and just speeds off into town. He's going like I think he gets up to like 80 miles an hour just going down the streets of Compton. Um, he arrives at the cemetery to check on Virginia's coffin. And it was funny is earlier in the book, I think it was in the first chapter, it mentioned Virginia. It's like his thoughts strayed to Virginia, and I was like, is this the state or is this a person? And so this chapter it confirmed that it was a person. It's cool. Um, and so he goes to a crypt where he managed to get her into that crypt in a coffin. Um, did we discover that if she's actually dead, like did he kill her and put her in the coffin, or did he just seal her in the
Well, so she well we find out later she dies of the plague, and
right,
then he
buries
buries
her
her in a shallow grave, and then
and she
she
comes
she
up?
comes back, and then he says they tried to keep her for a little bit, but she would like he tells Ruth this. They tried to keep her for a little bit, but she was mindless. Basically, he had to kill her.
Okay. I couldn't remember if he actually did kill her. In this chapter for sure though, I was wondering, did he just seal her in a coffin and goes visits her until he can find a cure and then come back and cure her? Um, and then also it's like, okay, is she the living variety or is she the dead variety at this point in the book? because we don't have all that information that he gave to Ruth in the later chapters. So inside the crypt, there is another vampire in there. Robert drags him out into the sun before he visits Virginia. Then he finds the timing, like in this chapter, it seemed like the next paragraph he'd be doing something in the next paragraph. He's like far away because like he goes and searches the houses and he finds another vampire in the house and then drags her. So I think the vampire that was in the crypt was a dead vampire, like it was somebody that had died and then came back. And then he was starting to wonder, okay, will the living ones die in the sun the same way? And so he goes, finds one and brings it out and watches this woman die. And for some reason, it's always women that he finds. Um, and he makes a note of that all the time too. He's like, why is it always the women?
Yeah,
Um,
that he experiments on. Yeah,
and so the the imagery, so he fights with her before bringing her out, and I love that kind of like scratching and gnawing. We find out, I think she bites him here. We do find out later that he's kind of immune to this bacteria. And this is where like that after he brought her out into the sun, he was now at the store, and then he's like, "Oh shit, I need to go back and find that house." And he goes like takes 30 minutes to get back to the house to find her. I was like, the book didn't even say he left her house. Um, so I was a little bit confused. I read that a couple times to be like, okay, you just gotta go. Okay, the scene cut to another area. Um,
yeah, and he went back to find her because he was like, "What if she rises in the night? Like that would make this thing kind of pointless. I need to make sure she stays dead or whatever."
Yeah, so he's still experimenting. He doesn't know if sunlight actually does kill them or just kind of incapacitates them uh, while they're in it, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what he wants to check. So he needs to go find her.
So he goes, finds her, and then he looks at his watch, and he's like, um, "It says it's 3 p.m. and the watch has stopped working." Dun dun dun. We get a nice little cliffhanger.
Because you used to have to wind clocks.
Yeah. Now you just have to charge them. So,
And I will say this book's also fun because of like the old school technology of like project. He has to set up the projector and like all this stuff. It's it's fun getting that, and then I think it's this chapter where he talks about how he has the car and how he learned how to like he always makes sure it's in perfect condition just in case if it breaks down he's kind of screwed.
mhm.
But yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, I also like it. There's an older style of writing words that we don't get often in modern day writing as well. So definitely kind of shows its age a little bit, but it's fun. I like it.
Yeah, even though this is in the future of because it's in the 70s when it was written in the 50s, which is fun.
Yeah. So
He didn't think of too much advanced technology in the 70s, which is fine.
yeah, I mean, I kind of like that. You
Yeah,
just
same.
like okay, just put it in the future, but you don't have to try to guess what technology is there. Sometimes that's fun, but just let it be, you know, let it be a story, not the things in it. So
Yeah, because this is a science fiction novel, even though it has a lot of some science fiction in it.
yeah. So chapter 5, he speeds home in fear that the vampires are now surrounding his house. And he turns onto a street and or as he's going, there's a few people that do come out of a house and a few houses and start chasing his car. Once he turns onto a street, there's a bunch of vampires that are out in front of his house, and left the garage open. Silly him.
Mhm.
They start chasing him. Ben Cortman reaches, like, I guess his car stalls or something. I can't remember exactly, but Ben
Yeah, his car
Cortman
stalls a little bit.
Ben Cortman manages to reach in, scratches him. Um, he punches Ben, then gets the car started. Robert leads them away and it's
Whoa,
like,
dude.
I'm gonna make a big loop so that they don't realize what I'm actually doing, and then come back around. And when he gets there, Ben Cortman decided to go back to the house and go into the garage and is waiting there for him. He fights him, gets the keys, goes to the door, unlocks it, then has to fight off another vampire that goes inside and locks the door, manages to kind of go to sleep. And up until this point, he's always been talking about, man, I need to soundproof the house as well because he doesn't want to hear them outside moaning and Ben Cortman telling him to come outside. Um, let's see. He the vampires destroy his car. There's no more power. He goes and grabs his guns and he goes outside and shoots some. He's starts fighting them and is like, wait, what the hell am I doing? There's too many of them. He backs into the door, back into the house, and kind of feels like he lost everything at this point. Like
Yeah, I like how he grabs the thing and does the double kick, swing kick.
oh yeah,
That was fun.
yeah, just going out and shooting, that was pretty fun too. So,
Yeah, this is very much the like the horde of zombies like running after him, but they're kind of fast. Very much, like 28 Days Later type scenes, which is this is like probably the one action scene in the novel. I think it's really well done. It's really fun.
yeah, I enjoyed it. Just the nighttime. It kind of gave me Evil Dead vibes too. Um, which I love the Evil Dead franchise.
It's great.
Um, I
Even
mean, I
even the
love
new
Sam
one.
Raimi. I'm not sure if I've seen the new one.
If you haven't seen Evil Dead Rise, it's very good.
Yeah, I don't remember
It's
what year
it's
did that come out.
like last year or 2 years ago.
Then I probably did not watch it.
It's on Max.
Okay, I will
It,
have to watch it then.
it's very good. It's very gory. So you might have to watch it alone, but
Uh,
it's very good.
Does it rehash the story? Is it like a retelling or is it a continuation or?
No, it's like a brand new thing with new characters and stuff.
Okay, because I find it funny that Evil Dead 2 is pretty much Evil Dead 1.
Yeah, and it doesn't continue the remake. It's like its own thing.
Okay.
But it's still like the Necronomicon and all of Deadites and stuff. It's really good.
Is Bruce Campbell in it?
His voice has a cameo, but and the Evil Dead show is really good. No, if anyone's seen it.
I think I started that and then I didn't finish it.
Yeah,
Because I
yeah.
think whatever streaming service it was on, it went away when I was watching it. Or I lost or it either left the streaming service or I no longer had a subscription.
Yeah.
So
That one's also worth checking out. Like you would think it would be bad, but it's actually really good.
yeah, I was enjoying it. Wasn't it directed by the same people that did was it Twin was it Twin Peaks? Is-
I don't think so. So that was David Lynch with Twin Peaks.
Right. Okay. I just remember Jason liked the Evil Dead show and he also when he was talking about it one night years ago at D&D and he also brought up Twin Peaks, which he also loves. So
I've tried to watch Twin Peaks. It's hard. It's hard to watch.
yeah, I tried to, and I didn't get very far.
I want to give it another chance, but it's hard. It's so weird.
Yeah. All right, so we'll move on to chapter 6. We get into part 2. It fast forwards to March of 1976. So a few months later,
Mhm.
um, at minimum 3 months later. We don't know how much time passed in those chapters, but it seemed like it was a day or two that
Yeah.
passed. So we get three months into the future. We find out that Robert did not lose everything. He, in fact, has a new station wagon. He went down to the car lot and found one, and then repaired the house and added the soundproofing to it. So go, Robert. Now he's trying to find a cure or a solution to the vampires. And this, we get our first flashback. Um, and this one is back to the morning before work with his sick wife, Virginia, and their daughter, Kathy. So his wife is definitely sick. I think his daughter's sick too.
Yeah.
And
I think so.
she was staying home from school.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we find out that there was a war. It was over. It seems like it was like World War II or some type of Cold War, or not World War II, sorry, because it's in the set in the 70s. Uh, so probably like some fictional war that came out of the Cold War,
Yeah.
where bombs went off. They created dust storms since then, and then there were swarming insects and illness going around. So there was a lot of talk about the insects were the ones that were spreading the disease. Um, and so I love the flashback. It's super sad knowing the current state of the world. So if we didn't know that the world went to shit, this would just be like kind of a normal run of the mill morning where it's like, oh, your wife and daughter are sick. I'm going off to work. Hey, don't, all this stuff's kind of happening. Um, it just seemed like a normal post-war day for them, with an unknown illness. So, and a lot of this, the like illness part, kind of made me think of the. I mean, obviously, it was a pandemic in the book, but it harkened back to some of the things that were happening in 2020 with the COVID-19 pandemic. And like people
Mm.
like, all right, I'm going to work, and others like, I'm sick. So
Yeah, and like, you know, deciding if you want to pull your kids out of school and all that stuff. Yeah, very much uh you know, it seems like pandemics are all the same. Because he probably lived through the Spanish flu stuff in World War One. Well, maybe. Well, not quite how old when he was born. But yeah, seeing that, and definitely you can see how much it very much influenced the zombie genre because of like this is very much like every you know 28 days later or whatever, like, oh, my wife's sick, all right, I gotta go to work, or like come home and she's a zombie or whatever. So they're like The Last of Us, like very much like that, where you hear snippets of the news of like stuff going down. I also like how there was some sort of war and maybe nukes were involved, but it wasn't like a lot of like nuclear wars, like everything's dead. It's like, no, it was like bad enough and probably some nukes were dropped, but it wasn't like, like there's still society after this war, which is fun. 'Cause usually like nukes is just like, yeah, the world's over, like boom, everything's dead. So it's
yeah.
interesting.
So Richard Matheson was born in 1926.
So it'd be after that.
So after World War One and the Spanish flu pandemic.
Yeah.
But
They probably grew up hearing about it. So
yeah,
makes sense.
um, the scene also kind of reminds me of, was it there was another, I think it wasn't it Independence Day
Mhm.
when like Will Smith there was a scene where he wakes up with his wife, goes to the bathroom, and looks out the window, and like there's chaos going on.
Yeah,
Yeah, this scene kind of
because
reminds me
because
of that.
the aliens are here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. Or even War of the Worlds, right? So I kind of I wonder how this one would have gone over if they just played it on the radio, like the myth, or not myth, but the legend of War of the Worlds. Whenever H.G. Wells read it over the radio for the first time, people thought like the Earth was actually being invaded by aliens. So the story goes.
Yeah, which I can believe with, however many people believe stuff they read on the internet, 100 years ago or whatever. I could definitely see people freaking out with that.
Yeah, it's fun to see those like influence and parallels and
Yeah, I've never read War of the Worlds, so I don't know how many perspectives it is. But I don't know. I don't think people would figure out that pretty quick that it wasn't real. If that's just one perspective, like this novel is.
yeah. All right, chapter 7.
Yeah.
Robert researched the composition of garlic, so he now knows like the percentage of oils and percentage of every molecule or whatever it makes up of the garlic. Wonders if onions and like leeks and everything else will work the same as garlic. And he tests this by, or rather, he doesn't test that theory. He tests the oil, injecting the garlic oil into a vampire to see what about garlic affects the vampires. And it's not the oil that does it, because if it was, injecting it into a vampire would have some adverse effects. Um, he brings home a vampire and is testing the cross. So he ties one vampire up, asks her why she's afraid of the cross, and as he's holding it in front of her, um, she bites him. Yeah, this is where he gets bit. He didn't get bit earlier. He gets bit here. Then he slaps her and snaps her neck and tosses her outside. Like, I think I laughed at this scene. Like, I wanted to read it to Christy, but Christy hates it when I just like stop reading something and like read her. Because like usually if it's the Stormlight Archives, then I gotta go, all right, so these are the characters, this is what's going on in the world, and here's the scene, go. Um, and she hates it. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, the scientific method in here, I've mentioned it before, with Andy Weir's books. It really harkens back, like the introduction and the details of the science being in the book makes it believable. And one of the complaints that some people have with Andy Weir's books is that they get lost in the science and the explanations. But that's fine. Like if you don't want to completely read that and try to understand it and fit it in, you can just go, okay, science, and then move past it and go back to the plot. But for those that like it, go, oh, this is cool. And then, if you're science minded or engineer minded, like you and I are, then you can start to theorize things going forward. So
Yeah. And even if it's not like I'm not the biggest, natural sciences person. I don't know if any of this is correct, but it's sounds correct enough, and for the plot it works. So like it's fun because like there's some reason why the smell is like basically they're allergic to it, so that's why the smell works instead of like the thing. And there's some scientific explanation for that. I was like, oh yeah, that sounds good. I could go with it. I've been watching so much Star Trek. If you say tachyons enough, I'll basically get roll with it. But I do appreciate that at least, at very least, it sounds correct. Probably a lot of that science has been debunked because it's been like 70 years, but it sounds good enough. So I'm good with it.
Yeah, I mean, I love that we've already solved the vampire problem in the world, though.
Hmm.
We debunked the myths of garlic and vampires.
And running water's next, but
Yeah, running water. That one I never knew was like I don't know where that came up in previous books or
I th-
lore.
I think that's in Dracula
Okay,
thing.
I need to read Dracula.
I've known that one because I also think Silver is vampires in Dracula, but I mean it's werewolf thing, but I think it also works. But yeah, I like the explanation for why the cross works, which we haven't gotten to yet, but
That one was really cool.
yeah.
And well, yeah, we'll get there. All right. Sorry, that was weird. Chapter 8. Robert sets up. This is the running water. He sets up a berry hose and a trough, and I wrote for what? Because I didn't realize this was like a thing. I thought he was setting it up for his house. Um, and then Robert has a few laughs about non-Christian vampires, like this idea of non-Christian vampires, just like, and you holding up a cross to them, like, why am I afraid of that? Um, and then Cortman is reminding him of a stand-up comedian. Um, I didn't write that person's name down. It did because I didn't bother looking him up.
Yeah.
So it's a comedian back in the early days, or completely fictional. Then Robert is now haunted by the dissolution of one woman he staked that left. It looked like 2 rows of salt and pepper, and he was like, "Man, that was one of the most disturbing things I've ever seen." Um, and this is where we get the idea of two different types of vampires, right?
Yeah.
A living and the dead. So those people that are just sick and they never died, but then also people that died and came back to life. Um, and he's trying to fit them all into the legends of vampires that he knows.
Yep.
Uh,
But
chapter.
yeah, I also think like for like the running water stuff, like that's why like I think like the Nazgul don't like running water and like the Trollocs don't. I think it's all kind of tied back to that stuff.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
At least that's what I guess. But like
makes sense.
I don't remember where it comes. I'm pretty sure it's in Dracula. I've never read Dracula, so
I never have either, but I've heard some people say it's good,
my
and
mom really
I
likes
want
it.
to read it. Maybe I'll read it next year, um, after we finish Stormlight Archives and all of that stuff. So
Yeah.
doesn't have to be for the podcast, but just leisurely
Hmm. Hmm.
and leisurely move on to chapter 9, which is the second flashback. And we have Robert flashing back to the day that his dear Virginia died. We have a man that took Kathy's body and threw it into the fire. Robert said his goodbye to Ben Cortman and his wife as they were in a daytime slumber. That was the last time he saw them alive. But Ben Cortman is pretty sure is one of the living vampires. Maybe no, maybe not, because wouldn't the other ones at the end of the book not have killed him?
I think they got the medicine. That's what kept them more like sane. So I think like even if you're alive, your mind will deteriorate over time with it
Without the medicine.
without the medicine. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Or they're not the new mutated versions.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, So then Robert takes his car, takes Ben Cortman's car. He sewed up Virginia in a blanket, then drove out to an empty grass lot, buries her. After 2 days of grieving, there's a knock on the door at 2 a.m. and Virginia has made it back to the house. There was also a scene that was kind of sad when Robert was leaving with Virginia, and a neighbor was like, "Well, take this body of my loved one um, to the pit with you," and he's like, "I'm not going to the pit." He's like, "What do you mean you're not going to the pit? It's the law. You have to." He's like, "I'm not going to the damn pit. Leave me alone."
Yeah. Yeah, because it's he said like people have been executed for like burying loved ones and things like that. It's all
Yeah,
bad. Things are getting real bad.
and
Um,
essentially morticians are no longer a job.
mm, yeah, like all the funeral homes have shut down. I will say I really like the way he writes his reaction to his wife dying. It's very moving and like very like soul crushing, just the way it's written about like his mental state of when she dies. It's very crazy.
I don't remember that exact detail.
It's at the beginning of the chapter where he like stares at her for like 40 minutes and he's all like basically disassociates for a while.
Oh yeah, I
Yeah.
do remember that. Yeah, that was really good. And it I mean, I went through this with our cat Kitty, and let me tell you, like we had to put her down, right? And we brought her in one morning and she wasn't herself, and I didn't realize how quick the drug worked, but sitting there and then I looked like I made the mis I say mistake, but I looked into her eyes after she is actually dead, and I'm guessing that the lack of blood flow changes the color and the glossiness of the eyes almost immediately, and that's when I broke even more than just like I was sad already from having to make that choice. Um, but yeah, then looking at that, it was I can relate. Like
Yeah.
you, your mental state, it's an emotional state. Um, I think he mentioned something about like his heart, just like the way he described like the inside of his chest just dropping.
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah. It's very effective.
yeah,
Which is yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, I always yeah, this book it's very depressing. I find it really fun for some reason to read it, even though it's like super depressing. I don't really feel depressed while reading it. I feel like kind of fun. It's fun dystopian, you know, vampire novel, even though it is super depressing. But yeah, I like all the little hints you get of like the past and like the government responses. I know our friend Dustin really likes the breakdown of society, right? Basically, right before the post the apocalypse, about or like kind of like World War Z and a bunch of other stuff. So getting the little tidbits is always fun.
yeah. I think Fear of the Walking Dead did that too in their first season, but
It was gonna do it. It's really lame. So they're like, we're gonna show the breakdown of society. They show the start of the plague, and then it cuts 3 months afterwards. Like, hey, how about you just watch The Walking Dead again? It was very sad.
yeah. All right, so chapter 10.
Mhm.
It is now April 7th, 1976. So we've moved ahead a month. Robert goes and visits the science room at a library to get books for him to study so he can try to find a cure. He figures that studying blood would be a great place to start. And he starts to think about germs, bacteria, or viruses are responsible for vampirism, but then freaks out when crosses, wooden stakes, mirrors, soil, and water don't fit in, but sunlight does. And then a dust storm comes at the end of the chapter, and suddenly figured it out. And I love how he looked at the chair when he's in the library. He's like, all these chairs are properly pushed in, and is like, this is the last work of a lone librarian, somebody that did not have a family or anybody to go home to, and this was their life, their poor, pathetic life. And it's like, it's like the wanderings of a madman. Like, this is where your mind is going, like making fun of some librarian that you didn't even meet and don't even know about. You're just making up this lore.
Yeah, I mean, it's what you do when you're alone and trying to make up stories of companionship and stuff like that. Because he doesn't have, you know,
He's like Quasimodoing it up, where like in at least in the Disney's Hunchback of Notre Dame, Quasimodo had a model of um the courtyard down from Notre Dame, and he had little models of the people that he would see down there, and he would do like little scenes with them, and like, oh, blah, 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 these are my friends, and then he talks to the gargoyles.
yeah. It's still so weird that that's a Disney movie because that story is so dark. It's not even funny.
That is the darkest like Disney animated movie, I think.
Yeah, but the actual story is like crazy. I don't know if you ever read the Hunchback of Notre
No,
Dame.
I
It's
have not.
it's pretty messed up.
Maybe I'll have to go read it.
It's fun.
Yeah.
I don't think it's super long either.
So we can move on
Yeah,
to chapter 11. Uh, this is where Robert teaches himself how to use a microscope. Like at first he's like, man, I can just use it. And he's like gets fed up with it and breaks one. And it's like, well, shit, I gotta go get another one. And maybe I'll get a book on microscopes and figure out that. So he becomes an expert scientist with microscopes. Um, and on his 37th slide of blood, he finds the bacillus bacteria. Also discovers that bacteriophage destroy bacteria, creating spores, which could travel by the dust storms. And so that's how it spreads so quickly across the world's population. And then he goes and enjoys a nice steak dinner.
yeah. I will say this book's also kind of fun because it just shows if you have enough time, you can get good at most things, pretty anything. It's kind of like Groundhog's Day or something where it's just like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm just gonna learn all the science stuff. I got all the time in the world. I just have to fix up my house, maybe kill a few vampires. But other than that, I'm good. I can just do whatever.
You have to have the discipline, though. Do you
True.
think you would have the discipline, Justin?
I don't know. To do this, maybe, because I found it interesting. I don't know where I would go to get microscopes. I guess I would go to school and get that. I don't know. Where I'm at right now would have totally gotten broken in. I would have died.
Yeah, you'd be dead. I'd probably be dead too.
Yeah.
If it
Yeah.
was like vampires,
I mean,
I'd try to fight them. I mean, if I did jujitsu against a vampire, I'd get bit and then die. So
yeah. I do like he says one of the things where like their brains are gone. That's kind of like because they haven't done the obvious thing of burning down the house. I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Because like if they were smart, he would just be screwed.
oh yeah.
But like they're dim. But yeah, it's fun, more science stuff. I do like that his first microscope, he got a shitty one, and he's just like, "What is this thing?" And just throws it against the wall, and he's like, Like, I guess I gotta go do research on a good microscope.
Yeah. All right, chapter 12. Robert is trying to connect all of the other things to the germ. The cross, the soil, the running water, the steak, the mirror, and the garlic. All of those went into the question mark column, and sunlight went into the germ column. He decides to get drunk for 2 days, uh, and kind of has a pity party, like, I can't figure this out. I'm freaking out. And then he sees a dog outside in the sunlight, and it's like, oh my God, that is a dog. Like, it is not a vampire dog. Um, which he mentioned earlier, like there was some theory that dogs or werewolves or whatever, um,
Well, yeah, there's myths that vampires can turn into bats, turn into
are
wolves,
dogs.
or
Yeah,
yeah. So, but he does note that the virus has spread to at least the canines.
right. So he chases the dog, but loses the dog. Sets food out for him, and then descends into regret and disbelief, like, oh my God, I just set this out. What if the dog comes in the middle of the night and the vampires, I've killed it. Oh my God, I'm such a horrible person. Um, he slashes up a mural that he painted and then collects himself and calms himself down, glues the mural back together, and life continues on for him. And chapter 13, he wakes up and the food is gone. He's excited and he goes out to the store, stops and gets dog food, flea medicine, toys, all sorts of stuff. And on his way back from dumping bodies into the fire, the dog returns at 4 that day and then 10 a.m. the next morning. And we have a little montage over a course of a week or two. Um, he gains a little rapport with the dog, gains just a little bit of trust, enough that he can be out on the porch when the dog comes up. But anytime he tries to reach out, the dog runs off. Um, then the dog is gone for 3 whole days, returns with glossy eyes. And he finally gets the dog into his house and locks him in a bedroom. And comforts the dog with a blanket, snuggles down, and it let him pet him. And then he unwrapped him. But then the dog died a week later.
Yep.
Very sad. I was really hoping for dog meat situation here. Um, and I have to say I was that thought was mostly influenced by the movie,
Mm.
because Will Smith's character has a dog companion for most of the movie. And I was like, surely this dog is going to be around and something cool adventure is going to happen with the two of them. But no, the dog dies.
Yeah, I so just right off the bat, I'm not a dog person. It doesn't mean I, want to see dogs die or anything like that. I'm just not affected like a lot of people are when dogs in particular die. Like John Wick and stuff, people freak out because a dog dies. I'm like, yeah, yeah, whatever. Like, it's still sad, but I'm not like devastated.
It's a major plot point.
It's in the first 10 seconds of that movie.
Right, but it's the major plot point for the movie. Like, it's the reason the movie exists.
Yeah, yeah. It's the inspiring action or whatever. But just all that to say, like, this is a really good chapter, but I really do like how brutally nonchalant it is about the dog dying. It's just like, yeah, and like a couple days later, the dog died. It's like you feel for him. I more felt for him than the dog. If that makes sense. Just
Oh,
like
say it's absolutely me too.
yeah,
Yeah.
like obviously it sucks the dog died and everything, but like I do like it as a narrative thing of just like breaking him down more enough. It's like the final straw we find out later, kind of just him getting into this kind of hermit mindset that he gets into. Um, but yeah, it's just a really good like kind of short story in a book of just like this guy trying to get this dog and it not being good because it's the apocalypse.
Yeah. And speaking of that, whenever we did have to put Kitty down, like it was we I told Jules before she went to school that day, I said, "Hey, we're taking Kitty to the doctor. We're not sure if we'll have to do anything. We're not sure if she'll be here." And she goes, "Oh, she might be dead." I was like, "Yeah." She goes, "Okay." And she never cried a tear. I was like, "What the hell? This is." I was very surprised. We'll see what happens with her when the other two animals ultimately pass away. But
Mm.
it was just a fact of the world to Jules. Like, oh, okay, Kitty's not dead anymore. And even now, we've got a little urn with Kitty's ashes up on a shelf, and Jules will be like, "We've got three animals. We've got a dog and this cat." And they're like, "Well, what other one?" "Oh, we got another cat, but she's up on the shelf." And people are like, "What?" It's like
That is a little weird.
she, ashes in the urn and just sitting on the shelf. Oh, you could just see like people that on their face.
They're like they're like, are we in a horror movie?
Are you a psycho child?
Hmm.
All right, we'll move on. Chapter 14. He buries the dog and then returns to work. He has been drinking less lately. I think he's switched to like wine. He doesn't hit the whiskey as much anymore.
Yeah.
Uh, he has a flashback to 1 year after Virginia died, which happens to be 10 months prior to current time, I think.
Yeah.
Um, and he's being brought to a tent with Christian zealots who turn out to be, some of them at least, be vampires or set up for vampires to come in and murder them all. Um, like a tent revival situation, like, "Oh, we have forsaken God, this is our punishment," and then all the vampires come in. I think I've seen this in a movie or a TV show before.
Yeah, I could see that.
Um,
I don't have the specifics, but that sounds familiar.
yeah, I can't remember what it is, but it's just like, "Hey, everybody, come here! Yay!" Wait, what are you doing? It's like almost like a cult leader is like, "Come here, I'll give you salvation." They show up, it's like, "Wait, you're killing us. You're letting these evil things kill us." Um, but Robert escaped. The sounds of the people that were killed haunt him forever. We return to modern day, which is 10 months after that revival night. And he develops a new theory for the living vampires, and that they fear the cross and ground because God forsook them in life. And they are literally insane. So, um, essentially, like if they're Jewish and they died, like the Star of David might be something averse to them. Um, or in any religion that has a deity, any symbol of that deity, if the person died thinking they were forsaken by their god, will become insane and averse to whatever object symbol of their god was.
Yeah, like because even I think it works on the dead ones because like even that little recess of memory, seeing if I guess if they're devout enough, it would trigger like I'm a dead thing, and freak you out.
Yeah.
Just a fun reason for that to work.
Yeah,
So
that is really fun.
instead of like God's holy power, it's like your belief in God's holy power that's, you know, killing you or repelling you away from it.
And it really does make sense.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So we'll jump forward to June 1978. What is this? 2 years
Yep.
later?
Yeah. 2 year time skip.
Wow. That's a big time skip. Uh, but it's good to see that he's doing well.
Mhm.
Um, he is out hunting for Ben Cortman. And at this point, he's actually not sure if he will actually dispose of him or not. Um, just because, and not because of some like, oh, I like Ben and we did all this, but it'll take away an activity that he's come to really enjoy. Like, man, where does Ben Cortman hide? Once I find it, is he gonna find another hiding spot? Um,
Yeah. And it seems like he kind of knew that he was hiding in the chimney, but just subconsciously didn't check it good enough to like keep him alive at the end. I don't know if that's kind of how I thought because he's like, oh, he's been spinning that in the chimney. I kind of checked it, but I didn't check it enough. So maybe he overlooked it on purpose. Maybe it was just a coincidence. I don't know.
maybe so. I didn't think that, but perhaps there were other people.
Yeah.
This is where he sees a woman coming across the field with red hair. Sorry, she runs from him. He chases her. She fights. He slaps. They calm down. Her name is Ruth. Literally, what happens there?
Yeah.
Um, it was kind of fun. The suspense of like, oh, is this a mirage? Am I seeing something? Um, and then when she runs away and she's not dying, you get a little hope for Robert here, which leads them to uh, Ruth coming to Robert's house, and she is actually wearing a cross. She has a little necklace with a cross on it. He shows he's like, man, I gotta make sure that you're not one of the living ones. And for some reason, the sunlight hasn't done anything to you yet. So he goes and cuts up a bunch of garlic, brings it and shoves it in her face, and keeps shoving in her face. And she gets sick. Um, and she runs to the bathroom to puke. Then he wants to take a sample of her blood, and she wants to leave, and he then shares whiskey with her. Uh, with and so all these kind of move into each other here. These
Yeah. They
chapters.
they start like um talking about each other's past and stuff. He's kind of interrogating her. Um, he's pretty dubious about her story, about like her husband and like kind of like what their setup is or was. Supposedly her husband died, um, and he's kind of like, how the hell did they make it this long? And so he's very dubious about her, but he kind of wants to believe. Um, he's he's Mulder in the X Files. He wants to believe. Um, yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah, and as they're talking, and that I mean that moves us into chapter 17.
Mhm.
Uh, that conversation, and as they're talking, he one realizes that he's not really sexually attracted to her, which he finds very odd because usually when he sees the women vampires, he's like, oh man, to experience that again would be great. And here he is with the supposed living human female. He no longer finds that he has that desire with her. Um,
Yeah, yeah, it seems like there's like 2 years and the kind of the loss of the dog. He's kind of given up on the past and he's just trying to live in the present and just like that sort of like monk mindset has kind of kept him sane and not really drinking that much for these past 2 years.
yeah,
Which is
and he's also afraid of like falling in love and starting a relationship, um, just to have like the potential of losing something again. And he starts contemplating if he should just like kill her for getting rid of her and getting rid of that opportunity of companionship and relationship and then having it taken away again. She gets him talking about the disease and information. He's explaining it um, in very detailed, like scientific detail in terms. And then so she gets Robert to a point where he's considering whether or not killing the living infected right away is the right course of action. Which now that I read that, I was like, oh, now that I know the end of it, there was a there's an ulterior motive for her getting him to change his view of killing them immediately. Um, I really do like some of the other information in the world we get here. Um, the explanation of the bacilli, uh, how they affect the creation of body glue. So like when bullets enter, the body seals it up. And it's like the quote is, it's like throwing pebbles into tar.
Yeah.
That's why the bullets don't work. Um, and then, of course, Robert's theory for his immunity from vampirism is that he was bitten by a vampire bat in Panama who was exposed to the virus. He's like, that's my story anyway.
Eh, makes makes as much sense as any.
Yeah. And then the other one, about the air entering the bloodstream. And the bacteria then becomes aerobic and parasitic as opposed to being anaerobic and symbiotic. So as long as blood is flowing and got a fresh supply and there's no air, oxygen, it's going to be a symbiotic relationship between the human host, and this bacteria. Once that ceases to be, then of course the spores come about, and once air is exposed to it, it pops. Yeah, so really, really, really fun. Um, kind of developing a relationship here um, with Ruth, and move us right into chapter 18, where Robert was sleeping and just jolts awake from a dream of Virginia, screaming her name. Ruth is standing fully clothed in the shadows in the room. Um, and Robert's like, "Where are you going? You were going to leave, weren't you?" She's like, I don't know. They embrace each other. Pretty sure they kiss. Um, then she's like, "You can draw my blood." He draws her blood. And as he's looking into the microscope, she starts to plead with him, "Don't look at it. Don't look at it." And then he sees it. He sees the bacteria, and she hits him in the mallet with a hits him with a mallet in the head. And then as he falls down, we get the description of his hand swiping her leg and wiping away a fake tan, and we see pale skin underneath. And I really love this chapter because it like the build up and the suspense. It's like, oh my God, okay, he's actually gonna start a relationship and be in love with her. And they're gonna go have sex. Not that I need a sex scene, but just yay for Robert. After 2, 3 years, he gets to have sex again. Uh, uh, but then all that hope and everything is just completely destroyed by the end of that chapter.
Yeah. Did you think while reading that she was infected, or did you think she was?
Um, I didn't think she was infected, but I thought she was part like I've seen too much Walking Dead that it's like she's part of another faction that is trying to take something from him. She's not who she was claiming to be.
Yeah, because
Boy,
her storyline was also not very good.
no.
Because she also doesn't
Like,
like know about the guns not working on them and stuff like that. Uh, she's like, "Don't you use guns?" He's like, "Yeah, the guns don't work though." She's like, "Oh,
and didn't she mention that he killed? Has she mentioned it yet that he killed her husband?
that's later." But yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, a fun chapter. Move right into chapter 19. Uh, Robert wakes up from his trauma-induced coma, being hit in the head, and finds a letter from Ruth next to his microscope. Um, it says she'd been sent to spy on him. She's in a faction of infected that have a mutated strain of the bacteria that allows them to be in sunlight for a little while. She insists that the embrace towards the end was real and that she was actually loving him at that moment. She encouraged him to leave and left a pill that their kind developed. It's made of defibrinated blood and a drug, which she didn't have information on what the drug was. Um, so yeah, that's where we find out she is actually not who she says she was. Kind of dashes those hopes for Robert. Um, and of course, he does not take heed of her warning to leave.
Yeah, but I mean, like, where would he go?
That's true. Like
Like, he's got the setup. He seems to have years of supplies stored up. Um, yeah,
now we could talk about the gasoline situation, right? That's the one of the biggest points of a lot of these post-apocalyptic stories is gasoline. It starts to break down and doesn't work well in combustion engines after a while. I don't know the science behind that. Um, but yeah, his generator wouldn't last too long.
yeah. I mean, I don't
Or
know if
theirs.
I don't know if it's like diesel. Maybe is diesel is that different from gasoline? I don't know.
I mean, there's a different chemical makeup in diesel, but I don't know if it deteriorates like gasoline does.
Yeah, I don't know. But like, oh, like that sort of stuff. I kind of just I'm good to hand wave. Like, how does he get thousands of cloves of garlic? I don't know where he's getting that from.
Right?
Um, but I kind of just like, yeah, he prepped a bunch and had him somewhere. Maybe he's growing them somewhere or something. I
He's
don't know.
growing them out in the backyard.
Yeah. So like, yeah, it does. Like it does. If you think about it, it probably doesn't make that much sense how stocked up he is and how like well prepared he is. Um, but I'm fine with just going with it.
Yeah.
Really, yeah,
Suspension of disbelief. It's a
yeah.
great story.
But I don't know if like diesel breaks down.
I don't know either. Are you looking it up?
We have the Google, yeah. Uh,
I should try to entertain our guests,
yeah.
our listeners, while you're looking it up. Um,
It's it takes longer than gasoline. Say it's 6 to 12 months. What it
Yeah.
says. So
All I know is that I still use gasoline from the previous season to put into my lawnmower to cut the grass, and it's worked fine for me.
yeah, it might just not be as effective, but still work. I don't know.
Yeah. I know I know it can gunk up carburetors. So your engine, the life of your engine and health of the engine will probably get um messed up quicker by
Yeah.
using older gasoline, but oh well. Well,
Maybe science how to make some new gas.
maybe so.
Maybe so.
All right, so we'll fast forward to January 1979. That's another 6 months pass, and they still hadn't come yet. But he watches. They finally show up. He watches through the peephole as men come down the street at night. They're killing all the vampires outside of his house. He watches them kill Ben Cortman and realizes that Ben Cortman had been hiding in the chimney across the street the whole time. He's kind of sad and angry at the same time that he's not the one that got to dispose of Ben. He's like, that was my job. That was my one job in the world right now, was to dispose of Ben Cortman.
Yeah, it's kind of like the person you hate, but then like somebody else makes fun of them. You're like, no, that's my guy to make fun of, or my guy to hate. Like, so yeah, he has some possession over him,
Weird possession.
and they have like barbed pikes. There's stabbing these guys with, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. They have guns too.
They have
They have,
guns.
they have guns, yeah. They come to Robert Roth's house. They force their way in. He fights back with guns. They hit him in the chest with a club. It does a lot of damage to him. He tries to claw at them, grab their legs. They stomp on his foot, stomp on his hand and break it. And then they drag him out of the house into the night. And that's the end of the book. No, I'm just kidding. That would have been an interesting end right there. Like, oh, okay. But we get one extra chapter, which actually makes the book really cool. Um, and I really like it. So he wakes up in a prison cell, and he's slowly succumbing to that chest wound. He's going to die anyway. Ruth comes in and visits him. Uh, Tells him he's going to be executed. She gives him an envelope with some pills in it, and it's either narcotics or poison. I don't know which. And Robert is actually at this point not afraid of death. He's like, well, this seems to be the evolution of life. He comes to the realization that he, at this point, is the last of a legend. Um, he's the only one left of the previous iteration of humanity. So while this, I wouldn't say the whole time, but a lot in the book, during the book, he's been thinking of the legend of vampires and how they're affected, and he has to save humanity. And the end here, he realizes, okay, they have a mutated strain of the bacteria. They're going to survive and probably procreate, and they're going to be what humanity becomes. Like, they are the next version of humanity. Um, and he dies happily, I think, knowing that. He's like,
Yeah, and he looks out. He sees all the people looking at him. He sees that they're afraid of him, and basically, he has become the vampire for this generation of people. He has become a legend. Like he is he is the boogeyman, and it's just really cool. Full
and
circle.
because he was hunting them, like he was
Yeah.
killing them. Um, And you mean he killed Ruth's husband.
Yep.
So
And like so, yeah, he had become the vampire metaphorically to this new group of people. You know,
yeah.
his legend's gonna be passed on about the boogeyman and stuff, and it's very cool. Makes the book really memorable.
I mean, it makes the book. Like,
Yeah,
if this chapter didn't exist, it'd be a cool story still, but it would not be I Am Legend.
yep,
It'd just be, oh, well, that fucker died in the end.
yeah.
Oh,
It'd just be
well.
like a survival story or whatever
Yeah.
about apocalypse. Yes, and it's what every adaptation has gotten wrong, including the Will Smith one is the worst. Because he's like, I cured the disease. I am the legend. I'm like, no, that's not the book. Okay, whatever.
Yeah, that's the only adaptation I've seen. So,
So there's three. There's the Vincent Price one, which is okay. I can't really remember much about it, but he's kind of like lofty Vincent Price and like kind of enclosed. There's the Charlton Heston Omega Man, which has some cool scenery of like dystopia Los Angeles, but it's basically a different story. And then there's the Will Smith one where he's in New York instead of LA, and he's a scientist and he has a dog basically the entire time until it dies. Spoiler alert. Um, and that one's
fuck that movie.
yeah, I don't like that movie. I think you can make this a really cool movie if you just have to commit to it, or like a 4 episode miniseries or something by like HBO. And if you just
4 to 6 episodes. Yeah.
yeah, if you just did the story, like it would be weird. It'd be hard to do because it's a lot of inner monologue and him being like depressed a lot and drinking a bunch. Like maybe do like Last of Us and have like a little bit more flashbacks or something. But I think you could do it, and it'd be pretty cheap because you really just need one actor. You have to get a good actor for him. But like, I really wish they would actually just do this because I think it would be really cool.
Yeah, I could see a whole lot of people not liking it, even if it was adapted like on point. They would not like, excuse me, they wouldn't like the end. It's because the whole idea of like getting close to a character and then there's just like, okay, the character dies. Now, you and I have a different opinion of what happened to him before he just died, but there's going to be a whole lot of people that are like, they're not too into it. They're just like, okay, here's a vampire story. Oh, well, he fucking died and that was it. Like,
I think if you did the final scene well, like if you had a competent director that could do like the inner monologue or something like that, where like you get the maybe you have a little bit more with Ruth and stuff, and all these people are afraid of them and stuff like, well, we found the butcher or whatever. You have something like that. You could do it, and I think you would get the point across.
so what you're
Um,
saying is we need Darren Aronofsky and for him to do something like he did at the end of the movie The Fountain.
sure, I don't remember the end of the fountain. I remember he goes into space with a tree. Um, and he's also a conquistador. It was kind of cool, but Aronofsky is not that good. Spoiler alert. He's he, uh man. That's
I liked that movie. Chris likes that movie. Dustin hates that movie.
and I'm like, it's kind of cool, but not amazing. It's kind of where I'm at with it.
I
I
have my own theories about the movie that I haven't really seen anybody like talk about, but like when I hear a lot of people, and it's been a while since I talked about it with Dustin, and I know we're off topic here, but
we
the
finished the book.
explanation, huh?
We finished the book, so we're good.
Yeah, the explanation that some people give about why they don't like the movie, the interpretation of it is completely wrong, different from how I interpreted the movie. And it's like, okay, well, yeah, if you believe, if that's your interpretation of what happened in the movie, then yes, that sucks. But it's like I'm seeing a different story than somebody else.
Yeah. I don't remember. It would be cooler if he was actually a space god or whatever, going to whatever that. I don't know. I don't remember that movie that much. I just remember it's basically like his spoil the fountain for people.
How
I
old
don't
is
know.
the movie's old, right? All
Yeah.
right, so look here. We've finished talking about the book. So if you don't care, um, we're gonna spoil the fountain after this. Next week we are going to cover what is it, chapter 15 through
Yeah.
chapter 15 of Oathbringer.
Yeah, 15 or 16.
Okay. Uh, through chapter 16 of Oathbringer. Read through chapter 16 of Oathbringer. Like, follow, subscribe, do all those things, share. Visit our sponsor, Mudcat Whiskers. Use code Paperweights at checkout. And we're going to dive into some spoilers for the fountain. So if you do not want to be spoiled by the fountain, this is your exit.
Or maybe Noah.
Or maybe no. Yeah. Any Darren Aronofsky film is on the table right now. So thank you for tuning in. If you're sticking around, cool. So the fountain.
Okay.
This is my interpretation.
Okay. And just to preface, I haven't seen this movie in probably 10 years, so if I get stuff wrong with my recollection of this, it's fine.
Yeah, it's been a few years since I watched it anyway. There is only one real timeline.
And it's the Conquistador time.
No, it's the modern timeline where he is the doctor that works on the monkeys trying to find a cure for his wife's disease.
Yeah.
His wife wrote the story of the Conquistador. Hugh Jackman inserts himself into that story as the Conquistador.
Yeah.
The space part is from his wife's like interest in Shiboba, and he inserts himself as Shiboba, like as that thing and that last hope for saving his wife. So there's no time travel.
But it'd be better if there was.
I like it the way it is.
Because it's kind of, it's just, I don't know. The movie's very pretentious. It's like, oh yeah, all right, yeah. It's about his wife dying or whatever.
It has an amazing soundtrack, though.
Yeah. Well, like, I need to watch the movie again, probably. It's fine. Like, I think that
better than Noah.
I like Noah. It's real bad. It's real bad.
It is terrible.
But that might be the one I've seen the most of his movies, which is kind of insane. Because I think I saw it twice in theaters for some reason.
That's weird.
I think I saw it once with you and maybe once with Chris.
I mean, I bought that movie. But I own most of Darren Aronofsky's movies.
Yeah.
A lot of them are really hard to rewatch.
I like Pi.
Pi's good. Requiem for a Dream is good.
It's good once. And you're kind of like, all right, I don't need to watch it again.
The Wrestler is good.
Never saw it.
I really like that one. Black Swan, that one's hard to rewatch, but it was good. Mother, I actually never finished.
Insane.
You've seen it?
I've just seen stuff about it. Seems crazy.
Yeah, I was having a hard time with it. But I should probably try and rewatch it. And outside of that, I can't even remember the last movie he did release. So it might have been Mother.
Mother is the last one.
Yeah, he just got a little too full of himself, I think. going, "Oh, I'm artsy," and everybody's like, "Every one of my movies is going to be a cult classic," and like, all right, dude, settle down.
Yeah, like I'm glad he exists, but his movies, for the most part, aren't for me. Um, I do still kind of like Noah. It's fucking insane. It's so ridiculous.
It is insane.
Like it is impressively insane for like this high touted director to do it. How it turns into like The Shining at the end, and it's so crazy. The rock monster, angels, and all this other stuff. That movie's crazy. Yeah, The Fountain. I don't hate it like Dustin hates it. I don't love it like y'all hate it. I'm like in the middle. Like, yeah, it was kind of cool visuals or whatever. I don't think the story is that good. That's kind of my thing. Is this, but maybe I'll have changed in 10 years if I rewatch it.
Yeah,
Maybe, and you know what? To tie it back to the book, Hugh Jackman is a legend. So
he is. He is. All right, Justin. Got anything else?
I'm good. Ready to read some Stormlight. It's been a bit.
Yeah. I actually started reading it. The the prologue is from the point of view of Eshonai. So
That'd be fun.
yeah, I'm ready to dive more into it. So
Yeah.
um yeah. So all right. Yeah, so anybody that stuck around still, we'll see y'all next week back with Stormlight Archives.
Ah.